Good afternoon, glorious Sunday, very glorious Sunday, and God bless. God bless to you as well, Nunca. God bless to you. Yes, Silk Road. So, when we hear about slavery, we hear the white man this, the British this, the white man this. The odd time we do hear about other countries in Europe involved in the slave trade, but it's all directed at the British Empire. Now, I'm not going to deny that the British Empire didn't make any money out of it. Of course, it did. It was like the age of the new age of capitalism at that time, and they were making money off it. But just because you were involved in it and you might have been the biggest money earner, does that mean you should get more of the grief off black people in general? I don't think it does. There's loads of stories. You'll get people saying that the Jews were instrumental in the slave trade and the ships and things like that. And personally, I'm not going down that road, but it's not to say that Jews didn't have slaves, because they did. In America, Jewish people had slaves, just the same as British people had slaves, Spanish people had slaves, Portuguese people had slaves. All the European countries are guilty, some part of having slaves in America, but you'll never hear that. You don't hear that. That's not irrelevant. We still can blame it on one set of people or one empire, which is a British Empire. Now, obviously, to those who know, it was also the British Empire that was instrumental in starting the end of the slave trade by not allowing slaves in Britain. They've got to be free men. It's well documented stuff. You can easily research this up. I have put a lot of links up to do with this already, but you can search. But still, it's a British man. It's a white man who's guilty, and he hasn't done nothing. I even attended a Black Lives Matter demo in Prestwich with Mank Dave, and that's what a guy said to me. He said, William Wilberforce is as guilty as all the rest of the slave traders. That's what he said. As guilty as Colston and all them. But anyway, it's still only the British Empire's fault. But let's just take a little bit look back at some history to do with how did the slave trade come to an end. And I mean, there was no social media then. No social media in them days. Yes, Martin Williams, they certainly did. The Ottoman Empire took millions of slaves. They did. I'm not going that far back, but yes, they did. And I have talked about this before. We've talked about the Barbary coast slave trade, which was mainly white people being took to the Arab North Africa area. I've talked about that in depth. I've put links up. We've put figures up, etc., and dates. But let's go to one particular place. Bristol we're in. The Seven Stars pub, tucked away down Thomas Lane, an alleyway besides a famed music venue, the Fleece. This tavern played an important role in countering the darkest chapters of Bristol's history. The Seven Stars opened in 1694 and was a popular venue for sailors stationed on the nearby Welsh Back. Towards the end of the 18th century, Bristol had profited greatly from the slave trade, and many of these same sailors were involved either in the transport of West African slaves or the trade in goods which had been produced by their labour. In 1787, Thomas Clarkson, an abolitionist from Cambridgeshire, came to Bristol and set up an office in the Seven Stars pub, and along with the landlord, Mr. Thompson, began interviewing sailors about their experiences of the slave trade and documenting the horrors of what they had witnessed. There was no social media in these days. So remember that now. If you're from Manchester or you're from anywhere in England and you're working class in these times, there was no social media. You couldn't directly get any information from America. The general working class person did not know. All they knew was the cotton were delivered on barges in Manchester up the Manchester Ship Canal. That's what they knew. And I'm guessing the same would have been down Bristol as well. So we didn't know who was getting these. We didn't know any of the sailors. People in Oldham didn't know any sailors. The sailors only stayed at the docks area or where the ports were. They never came inland and stuff like that. And then they get off. So nobody knew. But Clarkson had heard. He'd heard what were happening. And he wanted to find out. So he went to the Seven Stars and started talking to the sailors and getting their experiences. One person who was appalled by Clarkson's findings was a young William Wilberforce, whose tireless efforts contributed to the British involvement in the slave trade being outlawed in 1833, which was just after he died. And the thing is, William Wilberforce, he went in, I think, 1806 or something like that, to Parliament with a petition about the slave trade. And he got laughed out by all the rich people there who had, and a lot of them had made money. He got laughed out. But he carried on fighting, documenting, getting in local newspapers, talking to working class people about what was happening, opening their eyes. And I mean, in them days, in the mill days, the working class people were practically slaves themselves. You'd know that if you knew your history. And I mean, my family, go back, we can trace my English family in the UK to 16th century or something like that. So we've worked in them mills. And I'm guessing a lot of other people in Oldham who from here, you can be mixed race and have a white parent whose ancestors have worked in the mills like slaves, anything like that. And there weren't many. In then 1833, forget what the left and the progressive liberals say. There was no big concentration of ethnic minorities in England in 1833. There was practically non-existent. The times now from the 1950s onwards is when we got a lot of ethnic minorities coming to the UK. So, but before that, they were irrelevant. There was a tiny number of them, and I've only met one person who's black. Grenada, I think he's from, and he can trace his first ancestor coming to England from 1800, and that's the earliest person I really know, the earliest family I really know. But anyway, carrying on. So obviously we know the story of William Wilberforce. Just after he died, it became illegal to have slaves in Britain. But it didn't just stop there. There was still a fight because we couldn't control what was going on in America, and we couldn't control other navies, Portugal and things like that. So in the end, the British Navy got involved in stopping the ships transporting the goods and the people. But so we move on. So that's a little bit from like the early days, the Seven Stars in Bristol. And you won't hear the left talk about this. Don't talk about this. The left still blame everyone. They'll still blame Clarkson. They'll still blame Thomas. They'll still blame William Wilberforce for everything that's going on. They'll never say a word. You never see black people talking about this. Now, to a black person, well, it's nothing. They didn't really do nothing. Well, they did. Through these people and working class people like us who worked in the mills, we ended up putting an embargo on the goods coming. We stopped spinning the cotton in the mills. It was bad for us because we didn't get paid. We got locked up. There was demonstrations. People were arrested and imprisoned. But through us in Manchester to stop producing the cotton after it's spun from the wool, and that's what happened. But it goes a bit further than that. Why has an Abraham Lincoln statue? Why has Manchester got an Abraham Lincoln statue? And there's a statue of him, Lincoln Square in Manchester, surrounded by buildings. There's no prominence in him, but he wrote a letter to the working class people of Manchester, thanking them for helping to stop produce the cotton, to put pressure on the embargo to stop the goods being transported. So even though it was abolished in 1833, the slave trade, there was still a lot of work to do. And we had to stop these ships. But, I mean, eventually, obviously, it stopped. But, again, it's only the British they say. They never say anything else about other people. Remember, it was Portugal. There was the ringleaders. They started this off, Portugal, the slave trade. They started it off. It's well documented. And when they knew that they had to go up against Royal Navy ships and they was putting pressure on them to stop transporting the slaves. So this is what Portugal did. I put links up and I've done a video on this before. So let's say a decent sized ship could hold 800 slaves. What Portuguese were doing were doubling it, knowing that half of them would die, but they still make profit when they get on the other side. And even though the British had stopped transporting slaves, Portuguese were the last ones to do it, and that's what they were doing. So they was transporting more and losing more to death on the journey across the sea. But, we don't have to talk about that. All you got to talk about is the British. All you got to talk about the British. You'll never hear a lefty talk about Clarkson, William Wilberforce. You never hear them say that. That's why I just can't get over it, me. They won't say that, but I will. And I never denied that the British were involved in the slave trade. I've never denied that. Not once in this 15 minutes have I denied that. All right, but they won't say both things. It's a really good way the left are with not saying what that needs to be said. So let's read it. It might seem a bit odd at first for Manchester to have a statue of Abraham Lincoln, as there are no obvious links to the popular president of the United States. But according to the archives at Manchester Central Library, our city was a very important ally to Abe Lincoln's Union during the American Civil War. The statue of the American president is located just off Albert Square in the smaller, easily missed Lincoln Square. Its location is not really befitting for one of the most iconic figures in American history. The square is terminally quiet and surrounded by dull office blocks, and it is. I've been to it. The statue, which was sculpted by George Gray Bernard after the First World War, is a reminder of the historic link between the US Civil War and Victorian Manchester. Beneath the bronze sculpture is inscribed a letter to the people of Manchester, commending them for a historic act of solidarity against the slave trade. As the largest processor of cotton in the world, Manchester took a strong moral and political stance by supporting Lincoln despite his blockade of the Confederate States beginning in April 1861. So, we'd abolished, by law, the slave trade was abolished in Britain, 1833. So still 30 years later, the shipping cotton over. So we're trying our best to stop this. This measure drastically reduced supplies of cotton reaching Liverpool and therefore the cotton mills of Lancashire. The aim for Lincoln was to outmaneuver the Confederate States, win the Civil War, and ultimately abolish the US slave trade. But Manchester and the surrounding area, which had once clothed the world, found 60% of its mills falling idle, largely as a result of the blockade. So it affected us in Manchester seriously, if you're reading that correctly. Mill and shipping companies lobbied for the blockade to be destroyed, and in cities as nearby as Liverpool, opposition to the embargo and support for the Confederacy mounted. But in a meeting at the Manchester Free Trade Hall, 1862, in a show of defiance, despite potential starvation and destitution, workers agreed to maintain support for Lincoln and the embargo. The meeting took place just as cotton famine was beginning to have a serious distress across the country. US aid ships followed the letter to the shores of the Northwest, offering relief to starving mill workers in a gesture of gratitude. It is remarkable that the working men's address offered support to the Northern cause. This was a time when it was widely thought that the quickest way to restore the cotton supply and hence end the Great Depression was for Great Britain to recognise and intervene on behalf of the Confederacy. In supporting Lincoln and the Union, Manchester working people selflessly put their principles ahead of their economic self-interest. Lincoln wrote a letter on 19th of January 1863 to thank the people of Manchester for their support. So, these are the untold stories. You'll never hear this. You'll never hear this. Good afternoon, Mark. You'll never hear this off the lefties. They're not, for whatever reason, they just won't, they don't talk about it. And like I said, I've been to demos, where white people have denounced these people that I'm talking about. They've denounced William Wilberforce and Clarkson and Thompson. At the moment, there's David Livingstone from Scotland is under attack from the left. They want him took down because if you know about David Livingstone, he was an adventurer, philanthropist, Christian, and he travelled across Africa. And he wasn't involved in the slave trade at all. But, Africans did work for him, but he's really revered in Africa. Is David Livingstone. He's revered in Africa. That's something you won't hear anywhere. He's revered, and there still is the city of Livingstone in Africa. And when he died in Africa, they sent his body back, but they cut his heart out. And they said, even though he wasn't born in this land, his heart belongs here. And that's what the Africans said of David Livingstone. And his history is under attack right now. His history is under attack off the lefties right now. And I just can't say enough. Google him up and see what he'd done. And he travelled all of Africa. He was one of the first Europeans to go into deep Africa. You know what I mean? And so he travelled. He knew, he travelled and he did a lot of good stuff. But he's under attack now. Didn't earn money. Wasn't involved in transporting slaves, and he was against it. but his history is under attack, and this is so dangerous. This is so dangerous that if we take David Livingstone's history away, then there is no history for British people or ethnically English or British people. There is no history. So that's a good way to for them to control us and then bring in their kind of rule. So I mean, I'm against any kind of erasure of our history. I am. I will call it out if it's false, but I'm against any erasure. I'm against people like David Ogoloso, who preaches fake history and not correct history. I'm against anything like that, me. And but I'll get the chance. He's a professor at Manchester, so Manchester Uni, and I will be visiting the uni and doing a video there, and maybe talking to university people coming out and asking them about the history. But that's that. Thank you for tuning in. It's my Sunday. I've had a fantastic couple of days with Pat McGinnis, come up from London, and we went knocking. And we've got 50 on our sheet. We've got 55 yeses off around 150 properties. So it's looking really good. And it's just my first month of campaigning, and I've got till next year. Let's get my banners up. Bank details, PayPal there if you want to donate any money, which will be going towards mine and Pat's campaigns. Pat's on his second campaign in 3 months already now, Pat. And next year, I will be on my second campaign or second election in a year, within a year. So we're flying on all cylinders. We are flying all cylinders. We need a lot of help. We need help. We need to get a website up and running. It's going to cost money. We can't do it ourselves, so we need donations. We will have our own bank account soon, but any donations that come to me for the party will be put into the party. We do have to take accounts, and we have to document what donations we get. Big donations, I think it's got to be over £500 where we have to name somebody. But any of the smaller donations, you won't get named or anything if you don't want to be named or anything. I will thank you if I remember. But yeah, we need donations to get a website going and get some material. I'm looking at doing I want about 10,000 flyers for 2 runs through Hollingwood this year. And it's 5,000 each run. So I'm looking at 10,000 flyers. We may have some help with that, but we're looking into it. But thank you very much. Sunday afternoon. I haven't done a prayer or anything like that, but I will look for a couple of verses out of the New Testament for next week, because there is some stuff in the New Testament that I like, but I'll get a couple of verses sorted out for next week. But thank you for tuning in. I've got exclusive stuff coming on Thursday. Exclusive. Only Big Johns will be coming out with this, because I've been contacted by a victim of child sexual exploitation in Oldham, and I know the family. And I'll tell you what this person said on Thursday about how she's been treated, and how they are portraying her. So I'll tell you that on Thursday, but it's exclusive stuff. No one else has got it. And I will speak out to do with child sex exploitation wherever I can, whether I'm a counsellor or not. If I have evidence, I'll be taking it to the council to tell them to sort it out. Whatever I can do, I'll do. It won't be something that I'll forget about because I'm in a party. No, I won't, because that same child sexual exploitation is going on in my ward, Hollingwood. Grooming is going on in Hollingwood. And how do I know this? Because I'm a person of Oldham and I know Hollingwood well. And also going forward, schools. I've got a contact in the council and they're telling me that illegal and faith schools is serious in Oldham. And I've talked about certain schools in Oldham, and I'm against faith schools, but the issue is bigger than what we're seeing. I'll try and get some more information, but that will be coming on. I won't forget these things because, like I said, child sexual exploitation is happening in my ward where I'm running. So I am concerned, especially to them kids in that ward. I am very concerned. And as a bona fide or political party, it's something that we will talk about. We're against. We want action done, and there's been no accountability. You know, you've heard me say these things. These are the things that I go on about a lot. You've heard me saying, but as a political party, we won't leave that at the side because it's too unpolitically correct. We will be doing stuff more on it. And but thank you very much. A glorious Sunday. I've had a lovely 2 days. Message me there. Yep. So thank you to my mate Mark Friend for the 7 Stars pub story. He flicked that to me a few months ago. But you know, as working class people, we wouldn't have known where the cotton's coming. Wouldn't have known nothing. There was no social media or anything like that. But through people like Clarkson, Wilberforce, Granville Sharp, Henry, there was a black guy who was a free man in the UK at the time who helped. There's a big long story about him. He was involved in it. And but you know, if these people hadn't got involved, how much longer would the slave trade have gone on? If these people never got involved when they did. But you won't hear this. This won't come off anyone black. It will come off black people, but it won't be the Black Lives Matter people won't say it. The white liberal lefties, the woke mob, they won't say it. But you will get the truth from Big John. Thank you very much. Have a good Sunday.